I stood in the hallway of my grandson's 6th birthday party when my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "Stop interfering in our lives. We don't need your help anymore." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply walked outside, pulled out my phone, and called my attorney. Freeze the trust fund. Those 4 words would change everything. 2 weeks later, when my daughter-in-law tried to access the account to help purchase a $1 million house, the bank told her the funds were locked. The expression on her face when she realized who controlled that money is something I will never forget. My name is Victoria Carter. I was 65 years old, recently retired, and until that birthday party, I thought protecting your family meant giving them everything you possibly could. I was about to learn that sometimes love means knowing when to say no. 4 years earlier, my life had been completely different. My husband, Richard, was dying. We were sitting together in a hospice room that tried too hard to look comfortable. There were floral curtains, soft lighting, and a little vase of artificial flowers on the windowsill. None of it could hide what was happening. Richard had battled pancreatic cancer for 11 months. His hand felt frighteningly light inside mine. "Victoria," he whispered. I leaned closer. "Promise me something. Anything." His breathing became shallow. "Don't let them waste it." I frowned. "The money," he continued. "Our life's work. Money should build futures, not buy compliance. Remember that." I promised at the time I didn't understand what he meant. I would. Richard died on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. We had been married for 43 years. He had spent his career as a software engineer, starting when computers filled entire rooms. I had spent 3 decades climbing the corporate ladder until I eventually became chief financial officer of a successful technology company. We worked hard. We invested carefully. By retirement, we had accumulated several $1 million between investments, retirement accounts, and 2 properties. We weren't interested in yachts or private jets. We wanted security. And more importantly, we wanted our children and grandchildren to have opportunities we hadn't always been given. Richard left everything to me. He trusted me completely. After the funeral, my son Caleb stood beside me at the graveside. He was 38, a civil engineer, hardworking and ambitious. His wife, Madeline, stood beside him in an expensive black dress. "Mom," Caleb whispered as the casket disappeared beneath the earth. "You're not alone. We're here." I believed him. My daughter Claire had flown in from Boston with her 9-year-old son, Miles. She stayed with me for 2 weeks after the funeral, helping me sort through Richard's belongings and survive the long evenings when the house felt impossibly empty. One night, while we packed Richard's clothes into donation boxes, Claire looked at me carefully. "Caleb is going to expect financial help." I stopped folding a sweater. "What makes you say that? Madeline has already been asking questions." "What kind of questions?" Claire sighed. "She asked whether Dad left you everything. She asked whether you'd be distributing the estate soon." My stomach tightened. "I haven't even finished grieving." "I know." Claire placed Richard's sweater into the box. "Just be careful, Mom." I wanted to dismiss her concerns. Caleb was my son. I had raised him. I knew his heart. At least I thought I did. A few months later, Caleb and Madeline came to dinner. They arrived smiling. Madeline brought flowers. Caleb brought a bottle of wine. After dessert, Madeline reached across the table and gently touched my hand. "Victoria, we wanted to talk about the wedding." Caleb looked embarrassed. They had chosen an extravagant venue, and the costs were already climbing. "We can manage most of it," Caleb said quickly. Madeline smiled. "But there are a few things we hoped you might help with." I should have asked more questions. Instead, I remembered Richard's final words about building futures. I said yes. I thought I was helping my son begin his life. I didn't realize I was teaching his wife that my generosity had no limit, and that lesson would eventually come back to destroy the trust between all of us. The wedding was beautiful. I paid the $30,000 I had promised, believing that was the end of it. I wanted Caleb to have a wonderful beginning, and when Madeline hugged me at the reception with tears in her eyes, I felt certain I had made the right decision. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "You made everything perfect." For a while, I believed those words meant something. Then I discovered the wedding had actually cost $55,000. Madeline had upgraded nearly everything after I agreed to my contribution. Better flowers, a premium bar, a designer dress, and an expensive destination bachelorette trip. She never asked me for the additional money. She simply assumed Caleb would find it. He drained his savings and put the rest on credit cards. I learned about it months later. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "It's fine, Mom. We'll recover." I wanted to believe him. Then, 18 months after the wedding, Caleb called me from the hospital. "Mom, you're a grandmother." I drove there immediately. When the nurse placed little Noah in my arms, I cried harder than I had at Richard's funeral. He had dark hair and his father's nose. I looked down at him and whispered, "Your grandfather would have loved you." Caleb and Madeline moved into a modest 2-bedroom house. They were both working full-time, but parenthood was expensive. Daycare alone cost nearly $4,000 a month. One evening, Caleb called me. "Mom, I don't know how we're going to manage this. How much is daycare?" $2,000 a month. I didn't hesitate. "I'll cover it." "No, Caleb. That's too much. You're my son. Noah is my grandson. Let me help." So I paid the daycare directly for 2 years, $48,000. I never called it a loan. I never reminded them of it. At the time, it felt like love. Looking back, I sometimes wondered whether I was trying to fill the empty space Richard had left behind. Being needed made the house feel less lonely. Then Lily was born. She was 4 years younger than Noah, bright-eyed and endlessly curious. But after Lily's birth, something changed. Madeline decided to leave her job and become a stay-at-home mother. "It makes financial sense," she explained one afternoon. "The daycare costs for both children would be enormous. I want to be present while they're young." I nodded. "I understand." She smiled. Then she lowered her voice. "Money will be tight, though." Caleb was working hard, but one income wasn't enough for the lifestyle they wanted. I waited. Finally, I asked, "Do you need help?" The relief on her face was immediate. Yes, that single word began another chapter of my generosity. I paid their grocery bills for several months. Then I helped with medical expenses. Then I contributed toward a newer family vehicle. Whenever they faced a problem, I solved it. And each time I helped, Madeline became slightly more comfortable asking for something bigger. Eventually, she stopped asking. She started expecting. One evening, she said casually, "Victoria, you know you have those investments sitting there." I looked at her. "What about them? You and Richard worked so hard. What's the point of having all that money if your family can't benefit from it?" I smiled politely. "My grandchildren will benefit from it." She laughed. "Of course. But they're your grandchildren now. Their needs are our needs." Something about the wording bothered me. I didn't respond. Instead, I created 2 trust accounts, one for Noah, one for Lily. The money was protected for their education, first homes, medical needs, and other approved expenses when they became adults. Madeline wasn't pleased. She wanted flexibility. I wanted security. We disagreed, but I thought it was a minor disagreement. I was wrong. Over the next few years, Caleb and Madeline became increasingly ambitious. Their small house wasn't good enough anymore. Their neighborhood wasn't prestigious enough. Their friends were buying larger homes, driving luxury vehicles, and posting photographs of expensive vacations. Madeline began comparing their lives to everyone around them. One evening, she showed me pictures on her phone. "Look at this house." It was enormous. "How much?" "About $1.1 million. I stared at the screen. "That seems excessive," she smiled. "It has everything the children need." I already knew where this conversation was going. "Madeline, you can't afford a house like that." She looked at me strangely. "Not without help." The room became silent. I finally understood. She wasn't showing me her dream house. She was showing me what she expected me to buy. And for the first time since Richard died, I remembered his final words clearly. Money should build futures, not buy compliance. I didn't yet know how important those words would become, but I was about to find out. The conversation about the house did not end that evening. For weeks, Madeline found new reasons to mention it. The neighborhood had excellent schools. The streets were safer. The children would have larger bedrooms. Their friends were moving there. The house had a pool and a home office. Every argument ended with the same implication. I could make their dream possible. I finally told her, if you want that house, you and Caleb need to decide whether you can afford it yourselves. Her smile disappeared. You could afford it. That isn't the question. It is to me. You have 2 children, Madeline. Their future matters more than granite countertops. She stood abruptly. You always make everything about money. No, I said quietly. You do. She left without saying goodbye. I expected Caleb to call. He didn't. Instead, he became distant. His calls became shorter. His visits became less frequent. When I asked about Noah and Lily, he gave me brief answers and changed the subject. Claire noticed. You need to stop rescuing them, she told me during one of her visits. I know. No, Mom. Emotionally, you're still trying to protect Caleb from every consequence. He's my son, and Noah and Lily are your grandchildren. Protect them too. Those words stayed with me. Then came Noah's 6th birthday. Madeline hosted a large party at their house. There were balloons, catered food, entertainers, and dozens of guests. I brought Noah a small science kit because he loved building things. When he opened it, he threw his arms around me. Grandma Victoria! I smiled for a few minutes. Everything felt normal. Then Madeline approached me. We need to talk. Her voice was cold. Now, yes. She led me into the hallway, away from the children. You've been interfering in our family for years. I've helped your family. We don't need your help anymore. I thought she was setting a boundary. Then she added, and you need to stop controlling money that belongs to my children. My heart sank. The trust funds belong to Noah and Lily. That's exactly why I'm protecting them. You're keeping their money from us. No, I'm keeping their money for them. Her eyes hardened. You don't trust us. I trust my grandchildren. That isn't the same thing. No, I said. It isn't. She stepped closer. Then maybe you shouldn't expect to see them. The words hit me harder than she could have known. You wouldn't keep me from them. Try me. I looked toward the living room. Noah was laughing. Lily was chasing balloons. Neither child knew what was happening. I realized Madeline had discovered my weakness, my grandchildren. She believed threatening my relationship with them would make me surrender. For the first time, I refused. I won't argue with you here, I said. Good, then go. I walked outside. I sat in my car with my hand shaking. I wanted to call Caleb. Instead, I called my attorney, Jonathan Reed. Jonathan, I need you to do something. What happened? I explained everything. He was silent for several seconds. Victoria, we need to review those trust accounts immediately. Why? Because if they are planning to use the funds for the house, we need to make sure there is no way they can access them improperly. I felt a chill. What are you saying? I'm saying you should prepare for the possibility that this is more serious than a family disagreement. The next morning, Jonathan contacted the bank. The trust accounts were reviewed. Then he called me. Victoria, there's something you need to know. My stomach tightened. What? Caleb has contacted my office several times. For what? He's been asking questions about changing the trustee designation and accessing the trust funds. I closed my eyes. Did he say why? He claimed he was trying to understand the terms. And do you believe him? Jonathan paused. No. That was the moment I stopped seeing the situation as a misunderstanding. I was no longer guessing. Someone was preparing to take money that did not belong to them. And I was finally prepared to find out how far they were willing to go. The next morning, Jonathan Reed asked me to meet him at his office. I arrived before 9. He had already prepared a folder containing copies of the trust documents, bank records, and notes from his conversations with Caleb. I want you to understand something, Jonathan said. The money belongs to Noah and Lily. You are the trustee. Caleb and Madeline cannot simply decide to take it. I know, but they may try. I looked at the documents. How much are we talking about? Jonathan gave me the number. My stomach dropped. The combined trusts were worth more than I had realized. Enough to pay for their entire house, enough to change my grandchildren's futures, and apparently enough to destroy my relationship with my son. 3 days later, Jonathan called me again. Victoria, the bank manager, contacted me. What happened? Madeline came to the branch. My heart began pounding. She tried to access the trust accounts. How? She claimed she had authority through Caleb. Did she? No, what exactly did she say? Jonathan opened his notes. She insisted that because Caleb was the children's father, he had the right to access their funds. I closed my eyes. Did she provide documentation? No. What happened? The bank refused her request. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The manager told Jonathan that Madeline became aggressive. She reportedly insisted that I had no right to control money intended for my grandchildren. Then she demanded to know why the bank was protecting an old woman instead of allowing the children's parents to use their own family money. When the manager refused again, Madeline left. Jonathan immediately placed an additional security flag on the accounts. I sat silently across from him. She tried to get into the accounts. Yes, without permission. Yes. I felt something inside me break. For years, I had defended her. Whenever Claire questioned Madeline's intentions, I had said, "She's the mother of my grandchildren." Whenever Caleb seemed uncomfortable with his wife's demands, I had told myself they were simply under financial pressure. But this wasn't pressure, this was deliberate. Jonathan leaned forward. "You need to document everything from this point forward." "I will." "And Victoria?" "Yes?" "Don't confront them emotionally." I nodded. "I won't," but I still had one question. What happens if they try again? Jonathan's expression became serious. Then we protect the trusts legally. 2 weeks passed. Caleb finally called. "Mom, can we talk?" "Of course. We want to come over." I agreed. That evening, Caleb and Madeline arrived together. The moment they entered my living room, I could feel how different everything had become. This was the same room where Caleb had built Lego castles as a child. The same room where Richard taught him chess. The same room where we'd celebrated Christmases, birthdays, and ordinary Sunday dinners. Now my son sat across from me like a stranger. Madeline spoke first. "We want to resolve this like adults." I nodded. "We found a house," she continued. "The one you showed me." "Yes. How much?" $1.1 million. I stared at Caleb. "And the down payment?" He hesitated. $250,000, and you want me to provide it." Madeline leaned forward. "We're not asking you to give us money for ourselves. This is for the children." "No," I said. "It's for a house. A house in a better school district. You already have a home. It's too small. Then buy something you can afford." Caleb looked down. Madeline's expression hardened. "You have millions. That doesn't make them yours. They're your grandchildren's." "Exactly. So why shouldn't we use their trust money for something that benefits them? Because the trust isn't your emergency fund." She stood. "You're being impossible." "No, I'm being responsible." Caleb finally spoke. "Mom, please." I looked at him. "You've called Jonathan repeatedly. Your wife went to the bank. What exactly do you expect me to believe?" His face went pale. Madeline immediately interrupted. "That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "It wasn't." Silence filled the room. Then Madeline delivered the sentence that ended whatever remained of our old relationship. "If you don't give us the money, you won't see the children." I stared at her, then at Caleb. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend himself. He simply sat there. And in that silence, I realized my son had already chosen. I stood slowly. "Then we're finished." Madeline smiled coldly. "You'll regret this." Maybe I would, but I knew one thing. I would rather lose access to my grandchildren temporarily than sacrifice everything meant for their future. That night, I called Jonathan. "Freeze the trust funds." He didn't ask why. "I'll handle it first thing tomorrow." For the first time, I understood Richard's final warning. Money should build futures. It should never be used to purchase obedience. 2 weeks after the trust funds were frozen, Caleb called. His voice sounded exhausted. "Mom, can I come by?" "Alone?" There was a long pause. "Yes." When he arrived that evening, I barely recognized him. The confident engineer who used to walk into a room with easy smiles and endless energy seemed gone. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. His shoulders were slumped. He looked 10 years older. I invited him inside and made tea. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Caleb stared into his cup and said, "Everything is falling apart." I waited. Madeline found out the trust accounts are frozen. I assumed she would. She was furious. I looked at him carefully. Was she furious because the accounts were frozen or because she couldn't access them? He didn't answer. That told me everything. She says you betrayed us. Did I? She says you're punishing us. No. Caleb rubbed his face. Then why does it feel like punishment? Because for the first time, someone told you no. The words hung between us. Pain flashed across his face. But he didn't argue. Instead, he asked a question I never expected. Mom, have I been wrong? I stared at him. For years I had waited for him to ask that. For years he had defended every decision, every demand, every unreasonable expectation. Now he sounded genuinely lost. I think you've been afraid. Afraid? Yes. Of what? Conflict. He looked away. The silence confirmed it. I continued carefully. You spent years trying to keep everyone happy. Madeline wanted something, so you agreed. She got angry, so you apologized. She pushed harder, so you gave more. He swallowed. I thought that's what marriage was. No. What is it then? Partnership. Respect. Accountability. He closed his eyes. I don't think we've had that in a long time. That conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. For the first time in years, Caleb talked honestly about the arguments, about the financial pressure, about the constant need to maintain an image of success, about how every promotion, every raise, every achievement quickly became insufficient. There was always a bigger goal, a larger house, a more expensive car, a better neighborhood, a wealthier social circle, and somehow it was never enough. When he finally left, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Unfortunately, hope didn't last long. A month later, Madeline filed for divorce. The news shocked everyone except Claire. I knew it was coming, she said. How? Because people who need control don't react well when they lose it. The divorce became a war. Madeline demanded primary custody of Noah and Lily. She claimed Caleb was unstable. She claimed I manipulated him. She claimed our family had poisoned the marriage. The accusation seemed endless. For months, lawyers exchanged documents, statements, and financial records. Then the truth began to emerge: docs, text messages, mimes, bank records, witness statements. Former friends came forward, people who had watched Madeline isolate Caleb from family and friends, people who had seen her pressure him repeatedly about money and status. Even Caleb's employer noticed changes. His manager described years of increasing anxiety, stress, and emotional exhaustion. The picture that emerged wasn't flattering, but it was honest. One afternoon, Jonathan called. You need to prepare for testimony. I had known it was possible. Still, hearing the words made my stomach tighten. When? Next month. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Madeline's attorney tried to portray me as controlling, a wealthy mother using money to dominate her son. For hours, I answered questions. Yes, I had helped financially. Yes, I had paid expenses. Yes, I controlled the trust funds. Then came the most important question. Mrs. Carter, the attorney asked, if you loved your grandchildren so much, why refuse to release money that would benefit them? I looked directly at him. Because it wasn't their money to spend. The courtroom became silent. The trust funds were created for Noah and Lily's future. Education, stability, opportunity. They were never intended to purchase a luxury home. The attorney frowned. But their parents believed the house would help the children. Believing something doesn't make it true. He tried again. You chose money over family. No. I took a breath. I chose the children over the adults. For the first time, I saw several jurors nod. When my testimony ended, I walked out of the courtroom emotionally exhausted. But something else had changed. The truth was finally visible. And once truth becomes visible, it becomes much harder to hide. The judge's decision came several weeks later. Caleb was granted shared custody of Noah and Lily. Madeline's request to control the trust funds was denied. The court also accepted the evidence showing that the accounts had been established for the children's long-term benefit, not for their parents' housing expenses. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But winning in court didn't magically repair our family. Caleb still had a long road ahead. He moved into a small apartment and began rebuilding his life one decision at a time. He also started seeing Noah and Lily regularly. At first, the children were cautious around me. They had heard things they didn't understand. They knew there had been arguments. They knew Grandma Victoria wasn't coming around as often. So I didn't force anything. I came to Caleb's apartment once a week for dinner, On weekends, when he had the children, we went to parks, museums, and the zoo. Slowly, Noah relaxed. Lily changed even more. One Saturday afternoon, she fell at the playground and scraped her knee. Caleb was helping Noah near the swings. Lily ran straight toward me. "Grandma, it hurts." I cleaned the scrape, put a cartoon bandage over it, and kissed her knee. "All better," she sniffled. Then she climbed into my lap and stayed there. Across the playground, Caleb watched us. His eyes were shining. That evening, after the children went to sleep, he made tea. "Mom?" "Yes? Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on us." I reached across the table. "They're my grandchildren." He shook his head. "You don't understand. If you hadn't frozen those accounts, I would have helped Madeline spend everything. You were trying to keep your marriage together. I was being weak. No. You were being manipulated." He looked down. "I stopped protecting my children, but you're protecting them now, because you showed me how." His voice cracked. "I chose her over you for years. I know. And you still fought for my kids." I squeezed his hand. There was never a choice. A few months later, Claire visited for Thanksgiving. For the first time in years, everyone sat around the same table. The turkey was slightly dry, the mashed potatoes were lumpy, the green beans came from a can. It was perfect. Noah and Miles argued over a board game while Lily tried to sneak extra dessert. For a moment, I looked around the table and thought about Richard. His chair was empty, but his words were still with me. Money should build futures, not buy compliance. I finally understood what he had meant. The trust funds weren't really about money. They were about protecting possibilities. A college education, a first home, a medical emergency, a chance to begin adulthood without carrying someone else's financial mistakes. I had spent years believing love meant saying yes. Richard taught me otherwise. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes it means allowing someone to be angry with you. Sometimes it means standing alone while everyone tells you that you're wrong. And sometimes protecting your family means protecting them from the people who claim to love them most. That night, after everyone left, Caleb stayed behind. "Mom, yes, do you think we can ever be normal again?" I smiled. "Maybe we shouldn't try to be who we were." He looked confused. "Why?" "Because who we were allowed this to happen." He nodded slowly. "So what do we become?" I looked toward the empty chair where Richard used to sit. "Honest." Caleb smiled. "I think I'd like that." He hugged me before leaving. I stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the street. For the first time since Richard died, the house didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. I still had money. I still had the trust funds. But more importantly, I had my son back, and my grandchildren still had their future. That was the real inheritance. Not the millions in an account, not the properties, not the expensive things people fight over. It was the chance to leave something behind that money could never purchase. A family that finally understood what love was supposed to protect.